The crystal chandeliers of the Park Avance Charity Art Gala blurred into sharp, blinding needles. The marble floor rushed up to meet me. I couldn't breathe. My insides felt like they were tearing apart. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard my sister Amber's polished, public relations-trained voice slicing through the horrified gasps of the wealthy donors. "Oh, please do not mind, Michaela," she laughed, her tone dripping with rehearsed exasperation. She always acts out when the spotlight is not squarely on her. Before we go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community and standing with those who have been silenced. I woke up to the sterile, rhythmic, uncompromising beeping of an emergency room monitor. The searing, blinding pain in my abdomen had dulled into a heavy, medicated ache, but the diagnosis delivered by the attending physician was absolute and terrifying. A massive, life-threatening abdominal tumor, severe internal hemorrhaging. I was incredibly lucky to be alive. But as my eyes fluttered open to the harsh fluorescent lighting, it was not a compassionate doctor or a concerned loved one that I saw first. It was the slight crack in the privacy curtain, letting in the hushed, furious, and frantic whispers of my mother, Jennifer, and my sister, Amber. "Do you have any idea how deeply inconvenient this is?" My mother hissed, her voice vibrating with suppressed rage. "The grand opening is in exactly 6 weeks. We cannot have her playing the victim right now. It ruins the entire aesthetic of the family foundation." "She planned this," Amber replied, her voice cold, tight, and utterly devoid of empathy. "I know she did. She could not just take an antacid and sit quietly in the corner like she was supposed to. Now I have to figure out how to spin this catastrophe so it does not look like we are actively neglecting the little hypochondriac." I did not cry. I did not gasp in horror. I lay perfectly still against the stiff hospital sheets and let their venomous words wash over me, feeling the very last remaining thread of familial obligation snap in two. Anger was not loud this time. It was entirely clinical. For years, I had perfected the performance of pain. When you are the designated weak link in a wealthy, image-obsessed family, your physical suffering is never viewed as a legitimate medical condition. It is viewed as a character flaw. It is an inconvenience. I had spent my entire life performing competence, swallowing my agony so I would not disrupt their curated, flawless reality. I had treated my own failing body as a structurally compromised building, desperately patching the widening cracks with my own silence just to keep the grand facade intact for their benefit. But the performance was permanently over. I rubbed my eyes, attempting to summon even a shred of grief or regret for the family I was about to lose, but there was absolutely nothing. There was only pure, unfiltered clarity. This was not a family in crisis. This was a balance sheet, and I was deeply in the red. Slowly, deliberately, ignoring the pulling of my fresh stitches, I reached over to the rolling plastic tray and picked up my phone. My hands did not shake. I opened my primary banking application. For years, I had been the silent, reliable investor in their twisted version of family, holding all the administrative keys to the shared accounts and the family foundation's emergency financial access points. I had managed the logistics because they could not be bothered. I did not ask why they hated me. I just started clicking. Password changed. Access revoked. Funds permanently frozen. I utilized my administrative override keys, the very access they had foolishly left in my hands, to lock them out of the digital vault instantly. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady hum of the life-saving machines. In less than 12 minutes, I had entirely locked them out of the very financial lifeblood they desperately needed to fund their precious upcoming social events. They thought my physical collapse was a temporary inconvenience. They were about to learn that it was a total demolition. The blinding fluorescent lights of the hospital ceiling became a blank canvas for the memories of the past 14 months of sheer, unadulterated physical agony. It had not started with a sudden, dramatic collapse at a gala. It had started with a dull, persistent, gnawing ache in my side that my family had systematically and cruelly ignored. I vividly remembered sitting at my father's massive mahogany dining table, clutching my side in quiet desperation, begging him for a simple loan to cover a specialized medical scan. I was drowning in mounting medical debt, drowning in the terrifying, solitary fear that something was fundamentally and fatally wrong with my body. My father, Michael, had not even bothered to look up from his tablet. "Take a multivitamin, Michaela," he had scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "And maybe focus on getting a real, respectable job, instead of this little architecture hobby of yours." That exact same week, I watched the shared bank statements roll in, showing that my parents had effortlessly dropped $250,000 on exotic floral arrangements, imported champagne, and luxury catering for their so-called charitable galas. They threw $250,000 at a party just to look like generous philanthropists to their high society friends, while their own daughter was literally bleeding internally, begging for a fraction of that amount just to stay alive. And my career? My supposed hobby was designing sustainable, low-income housing blueprints that were already winning municipal awards across the state. I designed strong, foundational buildings meant to last, while my own family treated me like a condemned, worthless property ready for the wrecking ball. But looking back from that cold hospital bed, the dark psychology of it all finally made perfect, horrifying sense. I understood exactly why they dismissed my pain so easily. I finally understood the concept of the scapegoat's mirror. Every single toxic family system requires a designated weak link to function properly. They need a designated failure to absorb all the hidden dysfunction and sickness of the group. If I was the constantly sick, overly dramatic, failing child, then they could forever play the roles of the successful, benevolent, long-suffering saviors. My illness was not just ignored by them, it was structurally necessary. It was the primary load-bearing pillar of their entire public identity. If I was truly sick, they were neglectful monsters. If I was just a needy hypochondriac, they were living saints. They needed me broken so they could look whole. They did not want to cure my pain. They simply wanted to manage it, to keep it contained just enough to use as permanent leverage against me. My endless suffering was the dark room where they developed their picture-perfect public image. As the IV machine steadily dripped cold saline into my veins, I realized I had spent 14 months apologizing for inconveniencing the very people who were actively standing on my neck to keep their own heads above water. The realization did not bring tears or heartbreak. It brought an absolute, freezing, unbreakable calm. The blueprint of our family was fundamentally flawed from the foundation up. It was time to tear the entire structure down to the dirt. The heavy wooden door to my sterile recovery room swung open without a knock. My parents walked in, their faces pulled into tight, calculating masks of controlled irritation. They did not rush to my bedside in a panic. My mother did not reach out to touch my face or ask if I was in pain. Instead, my father closed the door behind them with a sharp, echoing click, ensuring no nurses were lingering in the hallway. He stood rigidly at the foot of my bed, casually adjusting the crisp cuffs of his tailored suit as if he were preparing for a board meeting rather than visiting his hospitalized daughter. "I hope you are incredibly proud of the massive spectacle you made tonight," he said, his voice dropping into that familiar, condescending, authoritative register. "Amber has had to spend the last 12 hours doing exhaustive damage control with the board of directors because of your little stunt." I looked at him, my expression entirely blank. I felt absolutely nothing. The emotional anesthesia I had administered to myself was absolute and total. My mother stepped forward, her designer heels clicking sharply and aggressively against the cheap linoleum floor. "We have the annual gallery opening in 6 weeks, Michaela. The press will be there. The mayor of the city will be there. We fully expect you to be discharged, dressed appropriately, smiling, and completely silent about this dramatic little medical episode. If anyone asks, you experienced mild dehydration and nothing more." "And if I do not comply?" I asked softly. My voice was a dry, rasping whisper from the breathing tube they had just removed, but my tone did not tremble for a microsecond. My father stood back, his cold gaze piercing, radiating a silent, dangerous ultimatum. "If you breathe a single word of this to anyone, if you try to garner an ounce of pathetic sympathy and cast a shadow on the reputation of this family, I will personally see to it that you are completely, legally cut off. That trust fund your grandmother left you, the one we actively manage, you will never see a single cent of it. You will be entirely on your own, drowning in those hospital bills you keep complaining about." I stared at them, absorbing the words. like raw data. A trust fund. I was 27 years old. I had heard vague rumors of a modest savings account from my grandmother, but I had never been informed of a formal $1 million trust fund. For 14 agonizing months, I had been drowning in crippling medical debt, taking out high-interest personal loans just to afford basic medical consultations, and they had been sitting on a dedicated trust fund that rightfully belonged to me. The tension in the cramped hospital room was thick and suffocating, but it was not emanating from me. It was radiating entirely from them. Their cruelty was not born of genuine power or strength. It was fueled by their desperate, pathetic, all-consuming need to look perfect to strangers. The upcoming charity gala was their entire universe. It was the ultimate, necessary performance. "Understood," I said quietly. I did not argue. I did not beg for their love. I just watched them with the cold eyes of an auditor. They looked slightly taken aback by my incredibly easy, frictionless compliance, but their monumental arrogance quickly smoothed over their brief confusion. They turned on their heels and left the room, entirely satisfied that they had put their foundation back in perfect order, but they had just handed me the master blueprints to their total destruction. They had foolishly confirmed the existence of major financial assets I did not know about. As the door clicked shut, I picked up my phone once again. It was time to hire an independent auditor. I hired a ruthless forensic accountant straight from my hospital bed, finalizing our engagement contract electronically and transferring the expedited retainer via secure wire. It took exactly 4 days for the devastating results to hit my encrypted inbox. Dr. Julian, my dedicated specialist, had just finished explaining the grueling, painful, 6-month physical recovery plan ahead of me, but I was barely processing his words. My eyes were completely glued to the detailed PDF document illuminating my screen. The truth staring back at me was not just morally unethical, it was a massive, undeniable, multi-count felony. The deep financial audit revealed the hidden existence of a comprehensive medical and educational trust established by my late grandmother, currently holding over $1.2 million. It was specifically legally designed to automatically disperse funds to me the exact moment a severe medical emergency was formally registered. But the money had been steadily drained, systematically siphoned out over the last 3 years in a series of highly sophisticated, untraceable wire transfers. I followed the digital paper trail with cold, unblinking, predatory focus. The money had not gone to my parents' accounts. It had gone directly to Amber. My perfect, polished, endlessly praised sister had been actively forging my signature and meticulously falsifying medical records to successfully bypass the trust's strict security protocols. And what exactly had she done with my financial lifeline? She had not bought a house or invested it in the market. She had used hundreds of thousands of stolen dollars to fully fund her high-end public relations events, her extravagant luxury vacations, and the exclusive VIP gifting suites that kept her comfortably at the very top of the socialite food chain. My literal physical suffering was paying for her luxurious lifestyle. Every single time I had cried myself to sleep in agonizing, blinding pain, unable to afford a competent specialist, Amber had been sipping expensive champagne paid for by the exact fund designed to heal me. My parents were completely complicit, eagerly turning a blind eye to the massive fraud, as long as Amber kept the family name gleaming brightly in the Sunday Society pages. I did not feel heartbroken. I felt a dangerous, terrifying, electric sense of absolute power. The psychological shift was instantaneous and irreversible. I was no longer the tragic, suffering victim of a highly dysfunctional family. I was the lead prosecutor in a criminal case they could not possibly win. I forwarded the entire 80-page audit directly to a lead investigator at the Financial Crimes Division, alongside a formal sworn affidavit, ensuring they had sufficient probable cause to act. I did not want a heartfelt family meeting. I did not want a tearful apology. I wanted handcuffs. I mapped out the precise timeline on my tablet. The gala was in exactly 9 days. Amber was scheduled to give the highly publicized keynote address on the importance of philanthropy and core family values. It was the absolute perfect venue for a controlled, public demolition. The highly anticipated night of the gallery opening finally arrived. The grand hall was a stunning masterpiece of opulent wealth, dripping in thousands of white orchids and brilliant crystal lighting. I arrived exactly 45 minutes late, walking slowly but purposefully through the massive grand oak doors, just as Amber confidently took the center stage. I was still incredibly pale, moving carefully and deliberately to protect the fresh, deep surgical incisions across my abdomen, but my posture was completely rigid and unyielding. I wore a tailored, sharp, pitch-black suit. I was not there to blend in with the colourful gowns. Amber stood gracefully at the mahogany podium, bathed in a warm, flattering spotlight, smiling radiantly at the massive crowd of wealthy donors, local politicians, and influential socialites. Our family foundation has always believed in one vital, unwavering core principle, she purred smoothly into the microphone, protecting the vulnerable among us. I walked straight down the center aisle, the rhythmic, sharp click of my leather shoes on the polished marble floor cut violently through the quiet, respectful reverence of the room, heads turned rapidly. Shocked whispers erupted from the velvet chairs. My parents, standing proudly near the front row, went entirely rigid, their faces instantly draining of all color. My father took a frantic, aggressive step toward me, but I did not even grant him the dignity of a glance. I walked smoothly up the short flight of carpeted stairs and directly onto the stage. Amber's perfect, practiced smile froze. Her eyes darted wildly across the room, desperately searching for security guards, but she could not break her flawless character in front of 300 elite donors. I stepped right up to the podium, forcing her to step back. I did not scream. I did not cause a hysterical scene. I simply reached into my tailored jacket and placed a thick, red-bound, certified copy of the forensic audit directly on top of her carefully typed speech notes. I leaned calmly into the microphone. "I am so sorry to interrupt this beautiful evening," I said, my voice echoing evenly and coldly across the completely silent, cavernous room. "But my sister's touching speech on protecting the vulnerable is missing a few key, legally required financial disclosures. Specifically, the forged legal documents she utilized to drain my personal medical trust to illegally pay for the expensive champagne you are all currently drinking." A massive, collective gasp rippled violently through the stunned crowd. Amber stepped back, her hands shaking uncontrollably, the microphone letting out a sharp, piercing whine of feedback. "Michaela, you are incredibly sick. You are confused. Please stop this," she stammered desperately, but her voice was shrill and cracking with undeniable panic. "I was sick," I corrected her calmly, my voice steady as stone. "Now, I am just incredibly thorough. If you all direct your attention to the main entrance, you will see I have invited some very special guests to conclude tonight's event." The heavy oak doors swung open once again. 3 fully uniformed police officers and 2 plainclothes detectives from the Financial Crimes Division stepped decisively into the bright light of the gala. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, followed by a wave of sharp, whispered judgment as donors set their glasses down and instinctively distanced themselves from my family. My parents stood entirely frozen in a state of absolute horror as the detectives walked straight down the aisle and directly onto the stage. My family was not shocked by what they had done in the dark. They were profoundly shocked that I had finally stopped playing along to protect them. I stepped aside, watching with cold, unwavering finality as Amber was loudly read her Miranda rights in front of every single important person she had ever desperately tried to impress. It has been 14 months since the explosive night of the gala. The legal fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely devastating. Amber was federally indicted on multiple felony counts of wire fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft. Facing serious federal prison time, she immediately turned on our parents to secure a plea deal, formally revealing their deep complicity in the extensive financial cover-up. The entire family foundation was heavily investigated, forcibly dissolved, and utterly disgraced in the national press. They lost their pristine social standing, the vast majority of their hoarded wealth to legal fees, and their carefully curated, lifelong illusion of perfection. I watched it all happen from a safe, quiet distance, feeling absolutely nothing but the profound, quiet satisfaction of a structurally sound, perfectly balanced ledger. I took the fully recovered stolen funds from my grandmother's trust and did exactly what my father had mockingly called a hobby. I opened my very own architectural firm. I proudly called it Architecture of Self. We specialize entirely in designing highly accessible, beautiful, structurally innovative medical clinics, and safe transitional housing for those who have been marginalized and abandoned by the very systems that were supposed to protect them. Every single day, I walk into my bright, quiet, peaceful office, draft new blueprints, and physically build things that are truly meant to last. But building a completely new life required successfully demolishing the old one entirely. I changed my phone number. I moved to a completely new city halfway across the country. I systematically severed every single remaining emotional and legal tie to the people who unfortunately shared my DNA. People often ask me if it was incredibly difficult to walk away from my own blood family, to watch my own sister go to prison. They always expect me to harbor some deep, lingering sorrow or hidden regret. But the truth of the matter is much simpler and much colder. When a building is fully condemned due to a rotting foundation, you do not sit around and mourn the rot. You clear the lot and start over. If you have ever had to build your own life completely from the ashes of someone else's toxic expectations, hit that share button. You are not alone in this fight, and your story absolutely matters. I have come to realize over the past year that the absolute most difficult part of healing is not just surviving the initial trauma. It is surviving the crushing realization that the people who deliberately broke you will never, ever apologize. For a very long time, I foolishly waited for them to finally see my pain, honestly thinking my endless suffering would eventually be enough to buy their genuine love. But forgiveness is not always a gift you give to the other person. Sometimes, it is the absolute only way to set yourself free from their prison. I did not forgive my family by forgetting the horrific things they did to me. I forgave them by fully accepting exactly who they are and permanently deciding they no longer deserved a place in my blueprint. True, lasting peace does not ever come from desperately trying to fix toxic people. It comes from finally having the courage to lock the door, turn around, and walk away forever.